Hi, welcome to another video of GeoSpinach. Today we're talking about clientelism, and today we have with me Orestis Spartiatis, another Greek Cypriot that has studied in the UK law and also has served in the special forces of the Cypriot National Guard. Both of us have lived abroad. Orestis has lived in the UK for the past 3-4 years. I have lived and studied in the Netherlands for the past 4-5 years. And we both have lived in more corporate societies, but we grew up in clientelistic societies. And the main debate today is about the positives, weird questions, and the obvious negatives of clientelism in a society, and in theory, how you deal with this and how they truly exist. Now, before I start directly analyzing going to the discussion, let's introduce to the general audience what we imply by clientelism. So clientelism, imagine yourself, you, as an individual, that you have your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, and your best friend. And these are your primary circle of individuals. And then you have your first cousins, your other first cousins, your other close friends. And these constitute your secondary layer of connections. And then you have a third layer of connections. And these are your second cousins. These are your other friends that you are good with, your very close working men, so forth. And then you have an even bigger outer layer, the people you know at work and the people you encounter every day on the bus, but you know who they are and you have spoken to them a few times. You know them from some other friends and so forth. And each one of us as an individual has its own circle of connections. And this is clientelism. In this system of clientelism, one serves the other in a system of reciprocity. So your actions, you have a responsibility not only to yourself, but you have a responsibility to your circle. Your negative consequences is the negative consequences of some other member of your circle. Your positive actions also constitute a positive to someone else. Now, moving on, you can observe that many people have their own unique circles of connections, and these connections are constantly intermingled. And here is where you build a clientelistic society. Now, clientelism in its core, it's very tribalistic. So it's within our human nature to be clientelistic. So the idea that if I want something done, and I don't know person B, but I know person A, and my person A is really close to me. I go to person A and I'm telling him, okay, I have this medical issue and I don't know a doctor. And the person is like, I know this friend of mine, person B, and he's going to fix you up. This, it's practice how a clientelistic society works. The issue with clientelism is when you introduce government in. When you introduce government, it's where clientelism becomes quite an issue. The reason it becomes an issue is because people get voted by their own circle and the connections of their own circles. So people that they know vote for one guy and that guy gains power. And once that guy has accumulated power in his hands, he doesn't really care about society, even if he says that he cares. What he cares about is about serving his own circle. So he will use that power to serve the people that voted for him and his interior circle. And each person in power, and he gets that power because of the clientelistic society, not because he actually is planning to do anything good for the society in general. So he uses that power and practically abuses that power, and thus leads to nepotism and patronage and thus corruption, where you have a massive abuse of the system. And the bigger problems arise when you have in a society where, in sub-Saharan Africa, for example, when you have an individual with a massive circle, a huge patronage system that comes to overshadow all, and everything passes through them. And there is where you have the massive corrupt individuals. And thus the government becomes a vehicle for corruption. And even if some individuals within the government have a good agenda, let's say, because of the monetary ability of the government, because government has money, the fiscal ability of the government, it will inevitably be abused by the people of those circles, and thus being sucked off.
Would you therefore say that in a clientelistic society, the stronger the government is, the more issues arise?
Precisely, that's the issue with clientelistic societies.
Okay.
That the main argument I'm having, and maybe many people might disagree because they might not understand what clientelistic societies truly mean, is that clientelism per se is not bad. What is bad is that if you introduce a very strong government, a government that has the authority, the fiscal authority and the legal authority to do whatever it wants, and thus it can be abused by those individuals, then inherently that minority of people that have much weaker circles will always get the end, the bad side of the stick, because of the strength of the other ones that are using the system. So the system can never actually function correctly in any meaningful form. And that is the major issue with clientelistic societies, that they can never move forward.
So yeah, in the legal community, we have this common debate about between positive liberty and negative liberty. Those two things is two different philosophies about how the law should be applied in order to achieve liberty in a liberal country. So the negative liberty would be a philosophy where the aim or the goal of the legal system would be to let individuals live as freely as possible, without much interventions by government or by the law, acting in a more passive way, and only intervening where an individual infringes another individual's rights. While in a positive liberty country, a positive liberty philosophy, the main aim of the legal system, of the law, or of the government would be to act in a more proactive way in order to tackle inequalities between individuals. And therefore, in summary, a more negative liberty legal system would require a weaker government, with a weaker government and a less intervening government, while in a positive liberty country, the legal system would require, the government would need to be relatively stronger and more intervening. And so, as you said before, the argument here would be that in a positive liberty country, where the government is stronger, if that country would also have, higher levels of clientelism, the more the issues would be in that country.
On that note here, Orestis, the same applies within economics, my field of study, that you can have a Keynesian system of modeling a society that provides goods and services, public goods and services, and you can assume that these goods and services will be provided quite efficiently. And these systems, these models, will always fail in clientelistic societies, and the major reason they do is because the incentives within the clientelistic societies are not purely profit-driven. They are profit-driven in the sense that each circle of individuals wants to maximize their profits. Each individual wants to maximize their own benefit, but power is not so much correlated in clientelistic societies with wealth as it is in corporate societies. So knowing a lot of people and coming from a good family by itself gives you quite a strong power. So losing wealth and in exchange getting more connections by providing a patronage system gives you much more benefit within the system rather than doing the right economic decisions and thus moving forward. Thus, any modeling system you apply of over-controlling government intervention in the economy in clientelistic societies, it's literally bound to lead to corruption. It's inevitable to lead to corruption. And any politician that lives in a clientelistic society, which is currently the majority of the countries in the world that are partially, fully, or extremely clientelistic, it's bound to be corrupt. So even if you have a dream of a grandeur society that the government can be benevolent and provide all of these good services.
Tackling inequalities.
Yes, tackling inequalities, protecting the property rights, all of those things, they are impossible to happen, like literally impossible to be applied, mainly because each individual cares only about his circle and he will abuse that circle for his own benefit. And this leads to a problem where you have the outskirts of society, the people with the weaker circles that always get the bad end of the stick within those clientelistic societies because they don't have the connections to benefit out of them.
I would say that I would accept the argument that there is an incentive from a government in a positive liberty legal system to, tackle inequalities properly without corruption. But that would be the incentive here, or shall I say, the positives of this would be in the long term, in the long run, in the long run. While on the other hand, the incentives to, benefit their circles would be more short term. So corruption will prevail. That's my main point, my main argument. It makes sense.
On that note, my argumentation is that to have a nation that it's naturally clientelistic, and let's be realistic, that at least in the short term, you cannot change that clientelistic network.
I would argue that not even in the long term.
Yes, but let's give some people.
It would be debatable in the long term.
Yes, let's give the benefit of the doubt for some individuals.
Sure.
You can have a minimalistic fiscal government, okay, and thus the abuse can be much less. But how can you guarantee in a legal system that it will not be abused by those clientelistic networks?
Yeah, so you could, I don't know if you could guarantee this, but you could make sure that it would be to the minimum level. So there are two types of legal system in the world, two main types, the common law, the system of common law, and the system of civil code. In common law, we have the concept of precedent. The concept of precedent would be that every decision made by a court would be binding to the rest of the courts that are lower in the hierarchy. So, for example, a decision made by the Court of Appeal of the UK would be binding by the magistrates' court, for example, and for the rest of the courts that are lower in the hierarchy. So they would have to follow that decision. And that decision would, in order to be overruled, it would be required from a court higher in the hierarchy to, overrule that decision. While in a civil law, in a civil code country, there is no such thing as precedent. So each judge has relatively more power to decide a case however he or she wants. So yeah, it is kind of the same argument here that the less the power that the judge has, the more beneficial it would be for a clientelistic country, because not only a government official has his circle, but also a judge has, his own circle.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's the main argument. So I would like to conclude that in a clientelistic society, it would be more beneficial to have a common law system rather than a civil code system.
And I think we see the evidence of that, especially the United States, Francis Fukuyama, in both of his books on the topic of clientelism, argues on this, that the US used to be quite strongly clientelistic, and as the years passed on, that level of clientelism got reduced quite extensively. Of course, some argue that the US is still clientelistic, and it is in some degree, but not comparable to other nations. But the main reason, though, in my opinion, is common law and legal precedents. The fact that not only the US government, comparably to other nations, was much weaker, so it could not be abused as much for you to benefit on your own circles, because of the existence of legal precedents. In more simple terms, I will argue, if a law has been passed, then doesn't matter who you are, that's the legal precedent. You can't just alter it. If you alter it now, then everyone after you will use that alteration. So
in a retrospective effect.
Yes, it will come back in a negative outcome. So in a common law system can help, in theory, a society to gradually become way more efficient in its clientelism, /government. Now, and a topic here that I haven't mentioned much about clientelism, the outskirts, the individuals that have very small circles. So even in strong clientelistic societies, you have individuals that their own circles are quite small. And inevitably those peoples, even if you have this fancy and good society that we just described,
with negative liberty
and assuming that the government is relatively
less
weak,
intervening,
and that they have possibilities and so forth, even though these people in these societies will still get the bad end of the stick, they will get less negatives. But if they don't actively try to build and make their circle much, much bigger, inevitably the rest of the society will kind of push them out. And this, unfortunately, is the biggest side effect of clientelistic societies. People feeling that they do not belong in the circle of people and thus are forced out. And in that sense, unfortunately, it's something that you cannot truly change. And well, that's for it. Something that you can't just change. It's just a bad, negative thing that exists within clientelism.
I mean, it is just a trade-off, I guess, because
it is a trade-off. But
yeah.
And you, for example, Orestis, living both in the UK and Cyprus, how will you argue? Why would you argue that clientelism is something good or something bad for you as an individual and for Cyprus, your country, as a whole?
I mean, I've lived and I've seen both the positive effects and the negative effects of clientelism. But yeah, in the end, I guess it should be said that there is no such thing as a perfect system. The goal here would be to come as close to perfection as possible, but it would be impossible to be fully perfect and having no trade-offs, no side effects. You know what I'm saying?
Here, and one last note before we conclude, and we're going to continue this discussion maybe on whether it is possible to change a clientelistic society or more. So if you like that, please like and subscribe. One last note is the outlook of clientelism. Now, clientelism gets a very bad outlook in society. And the main reason it does is because people living in corporate societies can just not fathom how clientelistic societies work. So they just cannot perceive how they truly work. So they only perceive them as something bad because they can't just understand the benefits that one individual gains within clientelistic societies. People living in clientelistic societies don't realize that what they have is something sort of a privilege, but they see it as something casual and thus complain of the corruption of the system. And I think many people will resonate with the thing I'm just going to say is that you go and complain every single day of your life, like the government is corrupt, that guy that got this position because of the government.
Lack of meritocracy.
Lack of meritocracy, everyone gets whatever they want, this system doesn't work, and so forth. And the next day, that same individual...
They do nothing to stop contributing to that system.
Yes, because they gain the benefits out of it. They go
Exactly.
to the better doctor that they wouldn't, in normal circumstances, go to because they know the guy that knows the guy that do it. They get a better position in the line because they know the guy that knows the guy and so forth.
And they still keep complaining.
And especially when you see those people where they will complain, but when shit comes to it and then things become really, really bad in their lives, they will move the earth and abuse the system as much as possible just to solve their problem. So if a husband's wife is dying, doesn't care about his morality anymore in this clientelistic society, he will abuse his authority as much as possible to protect his wife. And the whole circle will do as such. Now,
but I mean, that's part of the human nature, isn't it? To concentrate
yes,
on the,
and that's not necessarily bad.
Yeah.
That's actually, on a huge note, something very positive.
Yeah. I mean, it is what it is in the end of the day.
Yes, but it's like you said, there is no perfect system.
Yeah.
So guys, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. And if you want to watch more videos like this, please join the channel. And have a good night.